Now everything's acting normal. This is our Bucky call for the weekend. We're doing critical path, and we're at the end of the book. There's a chronophile of important dates and events and dates, and we're on page 368, and we're starting with the year 1912. That's what we're going to be talking about today. Uh, so, Anne, how are you feeling today, and what do you expect to get out of the call?
First, I'm actually very glad that I didn't miss, too much because I think for 3 weeks I couldn't join. So I'm just glad that I think we're at the point where we stopped as well. So I'm very happy with that. And I'm actually looking forward to this doing the chronophile. Usually, by the time we get to the end of a book and we see the appendix and all that, we generally would skip them. Yeah, I would generally because the information is like for reference, where they got the references from. But the end of the book, it looks like we can keep going. And the important thing is actually for us to be able to put in. I really love that idea, Richard, when you the fact that you started this, to be able to put our not experiences from our local at the local level that we could add into, sort of link it to what's going on in the rest of the world. So it is even like the inventions and so on, because generally we do not think about, okay, when it arrived in Malaysia or when we first learned about it at that point, what was happening in our part of the world. And then to be able to, finally it's arrived and so on. Even simple thing like KFC took forever before it arrived in KL. When it arrived in KL, I was in Penang. We never got KFC till many years later when we came to visit Kuala Lumpur, right? Then it never went to Penang for the longest time. Nobody dared to bring any fast food over to Penang Island where I used to live because the food there is cheap and everybody wants hawker food. Nobody, people will not pay for fried chicken at the price of KFC. So then you also see the economy of the, the two, like, I think Penang would be the second largest, city in Malaysia outside of the Klang Valley in Kuala Lumpur, and yet it cannot penetrate Penang, because the buying power, the way the economy runs in the two, so until we started going down the path of looking at the chronophile, I didn't even think about, linking it that way or sort of having thoughts on, putting some thought into, link, like making this relevant to me, as an individual. So I'm really excited about that, and because I'm pulling this out as well, the book that the 1001, there's a lot of overlaps, and I'm going to have a look and see how much may have been missed out perhaps as well, and what Bucky has that this book may not have. Well, I'm looking at 1785, the powered loom, and so I went backwards. So 1984 is when the power loom was reported in Bucky's, so it's a matter of the timing. It's very interesting, I felt. See, nail making machine showed up as well. Just slightly different years. Okay, so anyway, Richard, how do you feel, and what would you like to take away today?
Well, I'm feeling I had my picture on the screen a minute ago, and now it's gone off again. But we'll stick with the computer. Well, I'm feeling good. Had a very interesting discussion this morning on our World Weavers sort of book club, and so that was, we're talking about intuition and a number of other things along that line. It got me remembering back to the time I was in the British Science Museum, and I was trying to understand whether or not my self-study of Bucky's work and other kinds of new science work was was maybe something I shouldn't be doing since I wasn't sort of a scholar in those areas. And anyway, I was standing in front of a double helix, big demonstration, and it didn't talk to me to tell me whether I was okay or not. Then I turned, looked over my shoulder, and I saw a picture, and it turned out it was the Expo 67 dome, and Fuller was there, a picture on the poster. So it was like, why is Fuller here in the British Science Museum? So I went over and read it, and it was a story of how the double helix was discovered, and it was discovered with a combination of intuition and and the rigor of science, sort of the methodology. And it concluded that you really couldn't make big discoveries without both. You had to have both intuition and rigor. And so it's another confirmation in my mind about unity being minimum two. So, or the concave convex of intuition and rigor. So that was exciting. Um, and I was also, I think I told you on Wednesday that I had met my former student who was born in Malaysia, and I was telling her about your work. And so just the other day, I also passed on a link to the story of your work, and so we'll see what happens. She and I are trying to arrange a coffee with two or three other city students. So I'm hoping the Malaysia link continues at a number of levels, and so and I look forward to the takeaway of the chronophile dialogue between the three of us, and what things that we would add to the chronophile that match up with key dates in the book as well as key dates in our own lives. So, Joe, how are you feeling? What would you like to take away today?
I'm feeling pretty good. I've very much been thinking about this topic. I haven't been as diligent with my chronophile, and I always had respected CJ with how well documented he was with relating his life experiences with the events of the day, as well as with some of Bucky's milestones. So for me, this is actually something that I've been just giving a little bit more thought to, and I've appreciated it in a number of different ways. And I've been thinking about it in terms of where we are today, where Bucky actually thought we would be, and maybe in certain cases, why we haven't gotten there as fast as he had maybe initially thought. Specifically, I'm thinking in terms of technologically. And so I'm really, kind of looking at some of the obstacles that exist today, both politically and how that can stymie some of the progress of technology. And just kind of relating even some of my experiences with with the new technologies or even ideas that are just coming online, and some of the obstacles that they are still facing, and maybe how to break through some of those barriers, thinking out past the current current environment, and thinking into the future. Just thinking in terms of how technology actually will be able to have an opportunity to work for all of us, and essentially work for 100% of humanity and not just work for a few. And I think that that's really having the context of what Fuller was thinking in his milestones, and how we engage with technology, what actually changed our lives, is a really important exercise. You know, not, it's again, it's something that I haven't been as diligent on with, but that's allows me to appreciate what we're going through here all the more. Steve, how do you feel, and what are you taking away? What would you like to take away from today?
Well, I feel so I echo some of the same things you guys do. This whole idea of a chronophile, I don't think I really understood the significance, you know, of cause and effect and precedence, you know. Before that can happen, this and this have to happen. And this idea of the chronophile kind of puts things in perspective.
Mm.
And I've even applied it in my book because, like in my book, I'm writing a book on meditation. And so, you know, the fact that I took transcendental meditation at a certain time and then a decade later took Silva mind control, and then a decade later studied hypnotherapy. I don't know, it just seems to be the fact that I've had those concepts and was dealing with them and they were evolving, and how one thing leads to another. And I think the idea of a contextual understanding of any kind of development has just been highlighted by the chronophile thing. And I thought, gee, you know, is that really significant? But as we read down through it and ponder, I mean, in 1884, here comes Richard again. Let's see if this is his phone.
No, I'm coming in on another computer, see what happens.
Okay. And I mean, in 1884, they discovered evidently cocaine. You know, Bucky has down here cocaine became alive in there, and the gasoline engine
Mm.
and the trolley car
Mm.
and roll film. I don't know. It just seems so interesting that our lives today are all these things entwined. And I got inspired and I went out on eBay and I found this book.
Yes.
It was a used book. It's actually got glossy paper on it, like as if it were a textbook in a college or
Yeah.
high school. And you know, in 1857, the British started using camouflage. And the way they did it was they took their white summer suits in India and dipped them in tea in order to take the whiteness out of them so they blend in better. Just,
No.
I just the whole significance of like, where did all these ideas come from has just been very powerful for me. And I'm just delighted that we're going through it. And I'm really thrilled about Richard's contribution, because he went through all this with his class at college, and they've got their own little chronophile thing going. And usually I open that up, and I haven't opened it up yet over here. I'm going to look for it right now to open it up. So I'm looking forward to tonight and what we're going to discuss. And I'm going to open up that chronophile from Richard right now. Okay, good. Well, I thought I was. Maybe I put it down here. Gee. You know, I dropped my computer and I wonder if it's not working.
Hmm.
Because I would think that chrono should have come up. Maybe I'm not spelling it right. There it is. Cool. Here's Richard Ramsey's chronophile. So, oh, this is a newer one here. This evidently, this one should come up first. Okay. Pardon me for the time this is all taking, but my computer's thinking. I took it into repair today and I dropped it. I think I really got to buy another one. Okay, there we go. Now oh, I see. Okay, chronophile. What is this one? I opened up two. Profile, protected view. Lucky weekend, 1895. 1895. Okay, good. I've got two of them. So, and I added in on my, I have it in that my grandfather, my great grandfather did not buy tickets on the Titanic on 1912. So I'm going to start out in 1912 with that factor. It's so interesting that we ended on 1912 and I get to start off with that. So here's my 1912, and this is Richard's chronophile. So I added some of my own stuff. I added that one thing. I wish I knew more about my family, and I just don't know that. In fact, it's all documented. I have it somewhere. And then over here is Bucky's chronophile on 1912. So cool. And I think Richard just dropped off. Oh no, there he is.
Yeah, I just dropped off one computer because it said my Zoom wasn't working, so I'll try it in a minute. The other
Okay,
one, but
we have a picture of a wall or something. I'm going to stop
yeah.
sharing. Yeah.
This camera has been giving me trouble, but everything else seems to work. So
Okay,
I'll work
ready.
away at getting the camera.
So Richard, you're kind of like, I put in 1912 here. Steve's great grandfather did not buy tickets on the Titanic, and you've added some things here. And I think over on the right-hand side is, I don't know, which side is Bucky and which side is your contributions, or did you just go back and forth?
No, his side is always on the right-hand column, and mine is on the left-hand column.
Okay, good. And so we'll just follow down from there. So 1917, 1912. I don't know. There's nothing here from 1912. I don't think I deleted anything. And 1912 in the book, he has a couple things cited. First, self-starter exhibited Bendix. I don't know. What was Bendix? It was a car, a self-starter? What does that mean? And then X-ray spectra, X-ray crystallography. Cellophane was invented in 1912. Vitamins from Hopkins University. Atomic numbers from Moseley. Successful diesel installation on a ship. Diesel engine submarines capable of transatlantic. Copper from low-grade ore. Electro winning. So that's 2000. That's 1912.
Yeah, the one that jumps out at me right now is because I've had connections with Johns Hopkins over the years, and I was actually I found a book in an old bookstore that had to do with really had to do with the 1918 flu epidemic, and it related to the history of Johns Hopkins becoming the first basically public health institution in the United States that was promoting public health versus, if you want, kind of individual health or acute health.
Right.
And so this must be part of those early days of Johns Hopkins putting an emphasis on the importance of public health over just, if you want, individual health. So it sort of corroborates the idea that public health was starting to become important as early as 1912. And of course, it fits with even the beginnings of our own discussion this evening about COVID, because COVID, of course, is really a major public health problem, more so perhaps than, well, maybe not more so, but certainly equal to the individual medical problem that COVID has caused for so many individuals and took so many lives as well.
Yeah.
And in part, I think the big issue about whether or not I have the right to refuse to take something like the COVID vaccination as an individual sort of right versus the public good responsibility. And so John Hopkins is a public health institution, and medicine that was also happening around the same time where and you'll see in my 1915 one where Abraham Flexner in 1910 had been commissioned to do a critical review of all the medical schools in Canada and the United States. And he came up with the conclusion that they weren't empirical enough. And he made some really strong recommendations that in many ways had two huge negative impacts. It basically shut down all of the medical schools that were graduating Black medical doctors, and it shut the doors for women to become medical students and medical practitioners.
Whoa.
And those the door for women was probably shut for probably at least the next 50 years or more. And you had, you'd have a trickle of women who went into medicine, but not like we started to see in the 70s and the 80s and the 90s.
Wow. Okay. Any other comments?
I'm looking at that 1001 inventions, right? So
Okay.
in 1912, what else showed up is this thing, the ecstasy showed
Oh,
up,
yeah.
and they gave some background on that. Actually, was developed by the pharmaceutical companies, originally to control bleeding, and then also as an appetite suppressant. But that one is not they couldn't find the evidence for that one. But it was said that as what they call appetite suppressant for those in the front line in World War I. Yeah. But anyway, that was what it was intentionally developed, and then they couldn't find the because from the pharmaceutical companies, right? How did it get onto the streets was another thing. So that they don't have the history. They said they don't have that information on how it got to the streets and to impact until today so badly the ecstasy. Yeah. So anyway, that was very interesting, I thought, as well. Because he puts in some of the ones that came up very, very in a manner that is so destructive. I think the book also has in 1912 thereabouts. There's also the guillotine that was invented then as well. Yeah, so those created some real horrors in our human history. So anyway, that's what I have. Yeah.
It's interesting to kind of look at this because, like, this your book, Anne, has crayons in 1903, and of course Bucky didn't include crayons in his list of important events. But what I noticed that they have bottle making, glass bottle making was in 1903 also, and I don't think Bucky cited that either. So it's kind of interesting to see what Bucky is picking and how, I guess, it relates to the concept of critical path and synergetics and all of his concepts. So that's very interesting.
Yeah, and some are just slightly a couple of years off, like just before 1912, the first cloud chamber in the book is for Bucky is 1911, the book is 1912. The conveyor belt, I'm not sure it's showing up. It's not showing up on the list, I don't know. Yep. So some do, some don't. So it's good to, I think it'd be good for us to start adding stuff in as well. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. The thing that's interesting to me is the diesel engine submarines. you know, being capable of making transatlantic crossings, you know, because you know, I've actually seen some of the first submarines,
Yeah.
and how small and how, you know, and how, so, you know, basic that they were, and you know that was actually a very, you know, big advancement in essentially naval warfare.
Yeah,
And so yeah, go
I
ahead, I'm
think
sorry.
I visited your submarine. I think Long Beach was it, just before you head off to Catalina Islands. There's this old submarine called Scorpion, I think. Yeah, tucked. I don't know if it's still there. That was ages ago when I visited it, you know. So that was interesting because the smell of diesel and all that's still there. It was
Yeah.
like, well, I can imagine it working back then, yeah. Mm.
My grandfather was a sheet metal worker at the naval shipyard in Long Beach. We
Oh,
lived
wow.
he lived in Inglewood, California, and he was a civilian contractor for the Navy, and was doing sheet metal. Um, he was quite the craftsman. He had a workshop in his backyard by the airport in LA, and he would make metal boxes and with hinges on them, and quite cool.
Yeah, it was,
What sort of year would that be, Steve?
Oh, let's see. I remember him doing that. So it'd be like 1954.
My grandfather on my mother's side was a sheet metal tradesperson, I guess, that eventually had his own little small business in a small Canadian prairie town.
Huh. My
And
grandfather,
he
go ahead.
originally came from they migrated to Canada from Iowa in
Huh.
the early 1900s.
Huh.
There were railroad workers but he was a sheet metalist, and that's what he then turned into a small business sort of trade shop.
Yeah.
So we're related.
Yeah. I'll tell you, I think the world's a lot smaller place than I like to think some days. Okay, so 1912 here, he says X-ray, and looking at Anne's book here, the cloud chamber thing, we talked about the cloud chamber, right? Oh, he gives it a different year. Let's see, somebody else is coming in again. Richard's coming in with another.
Yeah, I'm trying. That's this other computer. So
Yeah, crystallography. Let's see, atomic numbers, diesel, and copper from low grade. Okay, are we ready to start with 2013?
Sure.
that's a big jump.
From 2000, I'm sorry, 1913. Are we ready to start with 1913? Now,
Sure.
wasn't World War I in here somewhere?
1912,
I thought so.
1917.
14.
1914.
Yeah.
That's when the military tank got invented. We'll do 2013 first. Who wants to read through 2013?
I mean, the
Sure.
tungsten, okay.
Carry on, Joe.
The tungsten filament lamp, the research and radiation, Geiger, atom model 4, the metal spray plating machine, 100 kilocycle generator, Alexanderson, nitrogen fixation from air.
Yeah,
and
let's
then
pause
it
right
goes into
there.
19 air. Yeah.
That's interesting. In Anne's book, I keep calling it Anne's book because, but the conveyor belt was in 1913. Why wouldn't he have the conveyor belt in his list of chronofacts? Because the conveyor belt, Ford introduces the continuous moving band for transporting objects. So Henry Ford introduced a conveyor belt in 1913.
Yeah, that's a pretty big thing too, especially considering how much you know, kind of covered it.
Right.
in his writings in general. And how important the assembly line was as far as specialization goes. And that's one of the major things that Bucky would actually address. So yeah, I mean, it's I'm surprised he left that out.
Yeah, me too. And I noticed that in 1912 in Ann's book is a rotavator. So it was a rototiller. But it's a motorized rototiller.
Mm.
That was in 1912, and I think that's pretty important. So anyway, this is cool. All right, any other comments, thoughts on 1913? We can go to 1914.
Well, no, actually, that's fine.
And you know what? What about the zip fastener, a zipper?
Yeah.
The zipper was in 1913. That's pretty damn important.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I mean, God, I'm sorry.
Okay, and you know what else this book has? Ann's book has stainless steel.
Yeah.
Mm.
I mean, that is major significant.
I
Okay,
think it would also, I think back then also it would depend on what information he has access to at that time, you know. But it's 1985. 1985, when he wrote this book, was it 83?
85, 86.
85, yeah.
Okay, he would have access to computer by then, yeah. But maybe it wasn't so exhaustive that he could find everything, perhaps, you know.
Yeah. Nothing like the internet, that's for sure. I mean, at that particular moment in time. So, yeah, there's also these major events that are going on at that, time as well.
Wow.
Just economically and things like that, which I'm surprised weren't captured, but obviously this is not an exhaustive list.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for some reason he thought it was pretty important.
Like as much as he talks about economics in this book in particular,
Yeah,
something like the Federal Reserve, I'm surprised doesn't appear.
yeah.
Mm.
So, and I got to tell you guys, I highly recommend this book because not only does it give a fact, but it gives like cool picture. Like that's the first tank in World War II, World War I. I mean, good grief.
Yeah. And they've got these diagrams as well on the traffic lights. Yeah, I thought it was interesting.
Wow. So interesting. The Army tank was ironclad against bullets and could, in a pinch, cross a 30-foot ditch. Wow. That's something. Okay. So 1914. Who wants to read through 1914?
I can go. Military tank, regenerative circuit, Armstrong, chrome, nickel, steel, and lab only. Panama Canal. Wow, that's cool. World War begun, and selenium photometer.
Selenium photometer. And do you want to throw in a couple things from your book from 1914?
The traffic lights, but they didn't have a lot.
The traffic light.
And the liquid fuel rockets.
Henry Ford opened his first factory in America in 1903, and with horse-drawn carts, pedestrians, bicycles, and cars sharing the treacherous and largely unlegislated roads, accidents were frequent. So Garrett Morgan, an African-American inventor, was inspired to design the traffic signal after witnessing a horrific crash between a horse-drawn carriage and a motorcycle and a motor car. Wow, isn't that something? Cool.
Yep.
Okay, 1915.
Okay, I'll read that one. chrome vanadium steel, transcontinental phone service, magnesium industry started, theory of continental drift by Wagner, high vacuum radio tube, Langmuir, tuned radio frequency reception, Alexanderson, first chlorine gas attack in World War I, general relativity theory, Einstein, neon lamp by Claude, radio telephone, introduction of chloropicrin mustard gas. Wow.
That was 1915. And Anne's book has lipstick.
Proof
You know,
glass.
And the gas mask. Now, he said something about the gas being used, right? First chlorine gas attack in World War I was in 1915. And in 1915, they invented a gas mask.
Now, if I'm remembering correctly, I think that had was that related to what with what was the previous one, the ability to can you go up a little actually? I don't know if Fritz Haber was actually the inventor of both of these. If you go back to 1913, I think nitrogen fixation from air. I don't know. Does anybody know that?
Yeah, there's a great book called The Alchemy of Air.
Yeah, and I think that's also related to the mustard gas as well.
Yeah, it could have been because Germany was a big producer of nitrogen.
Right.
And that was one of the things that kind of fueled, using a pun, it kind of fueled the war effort for Germany because they had all this nitrogen. And people were afraid of starving because they couldn't get enough nitrogen. They couldn't get enough fertilizer for their food. And Germans controlled the fertilizer because of nitrogen fixation.
And I think that this is an interesting thing that Bucky's capturing. And the reason I think that it's important is because it also highlights the living green, killing green, how we make these choices, right? And these between we can create something that's going to feed millions of people, or we can create something that is actually going to kill them. And so I think that that's an important thing to highlight.
Okay.
Yeah. The other thing in 1915 is Einstein's. And the reason it's interesting is because you'll see online that now I'm blocking on his name. Abraham Flexner was asked to speak to a national convention of social workers about whether it was a discipline, because it really got started in the late 1800s in Europe. And his answer was no, because it wasn't empirical enough. In other words, it wasn't tied to the machine metaphor of science. And I've always wondered what would have happened if Einstein had been the speaker and he talked all about the importance of relativity and relationships, which our profession was built on, the idea of relationships. And so I think the discipline that has been trying ever since 1915 to make the case that it was a science, they wouldn't have been preoccupied with that. they would have accepted that they are a cutting edge science because of the focus on relationships. And as I learned later, their focus is on the tension part of tensegrity. So anyway, that's a very important date for me.
Cool.
And we see that Fuller had entered Harvard and he had already been kicked out twice by 1915.
Yeah, this is really interesting because you put that in there and it's not in Fuller's chronology. It's not in his chronophile, but you added that. So that's interesting. In 1915, he enters Harvard twice.
Why was that he didn't get to stay?
Well,
Why did
the first time the story goes is that a number of the Broadway dancers, the girls, came to Harvard, and he got really enamored with them. And instead of spending his tuition money that was being funded by his relatives because his dad had died, he took off to New York and had a long weekend with all the girls.
My goodness.
And then when he was readmitted, his story I read said that now he's bored with what they were teaching. And I wouldn't be surprised. It's along the line of what disappoints Anne in the way in which traditional teachers teach. And so in that, I think, I don't know whether he actually quit or he just was non-compliant and got suspended again.
Yeah. Cool. I
Thank
noticed.
you.
I noticed the gas mask, which in Anne's book is 1915, is attributed here in 1916.
Yeah.
And the actual making of the mustard gas didn't get cited at all. So that's very interesting.
And
Okay.
stainless steel showed up in 1916. Yeah, in his chronophile.
Yeah.
Mm.
It's not in this book here.
It is. It was in 1913.
Oh, I see. It was 1913.
That's why sometimes it's more the dates when it shows up. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, cool. And by the way, in 1914 was the liquid fuel rocket.
Hmm.
And Bucky did not include that anywhere. Huh. Robert Goddard, a German guy, 1882 to 1945, gave serious thought to how we might get
Measure
to the
intelligence.
Yeah, no, how to get to the moon.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was thinking of
Despite-
somebody else.
Is what?
I was thinking of somebody else. I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's okay. Using mathematics, Goddard worked out the energy to weight ratios of various fuels. And this showed that gunpowder would never be powerful enough to lift a rocket into space. Also, to burn fuel in a vacuum, a rocket would have to carry its own oxygen supply. Anyway, Goddard was quite the amazing dude. Cool. So 1916 is the development of the gas mask, the Ajax Watt furnace, not mentioned in this book. The helicopter, not mentioned in this book. The depth bomb, which was
That one shows up. That one shows up a bit later, I think. That's bomb.
shows up later.
Mm.
And the depth bomb shows up. That was against submarines. You guys know what a depth bomb is, right?
Right.
And so, and then stainless steel is attributed there. It was a secret of World War I. The first commercial use was in 1928. Cool. Any other comments before we move on to 1917? Okay, here we go. Anybody want to read?
The submarine detector, the Sperry rangekeeper, the aerial photography, discovery of protractium, protractionum.
Yeah.
Am I saying that correctly? Optical glass industry in the U.S., commercial cadmium,
Yeah.
and vitamin B.
Vitamin B.
Yeah.
1917 is an eventless year in this book here, in this guy. Nothing happened in 17. Okay, are we ready to continue? Richard, do you have anything?
No, this is going well.
Okay. 1918, electron employed. Oh, they started using electrons. Examination by X-ray of brain. Lewisite. I don't even know what Lewisite is. The toaster and sonar. I think this book has a different time for sonar.
Yep. And
So I'm sure the depth bomb and sonar must be connected.
Yeah. And I'm surprised. Maybe he talks about the mass spectrometer later, but I would think that a mass spectrometer is kind of an eventful event.
yeah.
And that's mentioned in Anne's reference here. Cool. 1919, someone want to read? Oh, and by
Okay.
the way, 1918 is also a hydraulic brake.
Yeah.
And also the anthrax vaccine, the pivoting bed. So you could, in a studio apartment, you could put the bed up against the wall. And there's a really cool ad with Groucho Marx in there. Groucho Marx says, believe me, you've got to get up pretty early in the morning if you want to get out of bed. That was his joke regarding the pivoting bed. Okay.
Yep.
1919.
I'll read that one. NC4 flight across Atlantic via Bermuda and Azores. First wireless phone two-way conversation across the Atlantic from Brest, France to Arlington, Virginia. Alcock and Brown non-stop flight across the Atlantic. R34 Atlantic flight. Louis Langmuir, is that how you pronounce his name? Theory of atomic structure. First man-made transmutation, Rutherford. Yeah.
Okay.
That's 2019.
This has the pop-up toaster in 1919. And has a flip-flop circuit.
Yeah.
A digital logical circuit in 1919. That's interesting. Okay. Any other comments, thoughts? I haven't looked at your thing over here, Richard, for a minute. What's going on? 1917. We haven't gotten to 22 yet. It's coming. We'll get to 22 in a minute.
You know, 1917 was one of our early pioneers trying to answer Flexner's 1915 criticism, was the book she wrote. And because it's titled Social Diagnosis, the emphasis is on diagnosis. So she was trying to align herself with medical diagnosis. So still trying to cater to the idea of Flexner's criticism that the methodology wasn't sort of diagnostically rigorous enough.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah, I mean, it's, you know, actually household refrigeration had actually just entered in, but you know, the other interesting thing is just how we're moving towards electric power at this particular moment in time in history as well.
And particularly in 1918, you had your examination by X-rays
Mhm.
of the human brain. So that's interesting. There's the toaster. It is 1919, this book, it's 1918 there. Okay. We ready to move on to 1920?
Yes.
Okay. Who wants to read?
Neutron discovered sodium from salt electric furnace. Harkins, by the way, I'm sorry. Sodium from salt electric furnace production of phosphoric
Phosphoric.
phosphoric acid.
Yeah,
Sorry,
phosphorus.
acid. Commercial radio broadcast of voice. That's it.
In this book, it mentions the Allen wrench was developed in 1920.
Oh,
I'm checking online. I just keyed in by the year. So the inventions in 1900 to 1940, I think, showed up. So in 1920, there was also this invention of the Tommy gun, and the Band-Aid was invented as well.
The Tommy gun and bandage?
Band-Aid, the Band-Aid.
Band-aids. Yeah, Band-Aid. Interesting.
Yep.
Okay, cool. Okay. I guess we're at 1920. Yeah. Okay. 21. By the way, commercial radio broadcast of voice. I was in commercial radio in the 1970s.
Yeah.
So that was 50 years before my time, first commercial radio. That's good.
What sort of commercials were you making? I mean, were you in at that time?
Commercial radio, what that means is they did a radio broadcast and they had some product sponsoring it.
So what sort of products were you advocating? I mean, were you in?
Well, by the time I was in radio in 1970, we would just go into local merchants in town and sell advertising. So we sold to bowling alleys, to clothing stores, restaurants, clothing stores, and bowling alleys, and maybe some electronic stuff. So like, I remember back in those days, people were into nice stereos at home. So Kenwood, type stuff, JBL, but that was in 1975. So, roughly in. Okay.
JBL is the sound system, right?
Yeah, they're really good speakers even now. JBL makes the best speakers. And
okay, so what we'll do some linking here, because I think one of our we have JBL speakers in our school, and it's sponsored by the JBL company.
Oh, cool.
In our hall, yeah.
Yeah, beautiful. Okay.
Yep.
I'll read. 1921 compound gas engine. I don't know what that means. Anybody know what a compound gas engine is? Electrical prospecting devices, rubber plated on metal. Rubber plated on metal, 1921. The book over here cites the Jubilee clip The Jubilee clip is that clip that firmly seals a rubber hose to a pipe.
Oh, the one where you twist it, is it?
I think it's
Ah,
the kind that have they had a little clamp device. Let's see what we get here. Jubil. Yeah, it's these
Yeah.
guys.
hmm. 100
That's-
years.
Oh,
Wow.
right.
Well,
Hmm.
interesting.
I thought these are like screws clips. I thought it would be the one where they pinch.
Right.
You
Hmm.
pinch them apart. But these are all screw.
But
These
they
are all-
do pinch.
Now
But you're
that-
right,
n-
they do
yeah.
pinch, yeah.
Yeah, they're and funny.
I just put one on somewhere, actually.
You did.
Yeah,
Well,
downstairs
just
in my
for your
basement.
information, Joe, they were invented in 1922
Oh,
or whatever.
this
Right.
was the one that, yeah, one I had might have been from
1921.
that time. It was old.
Cool. Okay, any other comments or thoughts?
On the online, it says artificial life begins with the first robot built in
Interesting.
1921. Yeah.
Wow.
Okay, I really got to remember I need to get someone to help us type this out so we can add stuff to it. Yeah. Mm.
Are we
Yeah, I
on
think that's, oh, good.
Are we on 1921? Where are we? I'm missing some stuff here. I got distracted.
Oh, yes, we
Uh,
are, another compound gas engine electrical, yeah.
Yeah, we should be on 22.
Yeah, there's a tuberculosis vaccine in 1921. And
Oh, yeah.
the lie detector, there's a guy with a gun with a guy at the lie detector. Was invented in 1921. Now, why the guy is holding a gun and he's pointing it at the wall? Crazy, huh? He's pointing it away from the guy. I guess when the guy lies, he points the gun at the guy. And when the guy doesn't lie, he points the gun at the wall. I don't know. Okay. 22. Are we ready for 1922?
Mhm.
Okay. I guess I'll read thermocouple for interplanetary sensing. Thermocouple for interplanetary sensing. That's interesting. Fundamental complementarity in physical universe. Fundamental complementarity in physical universe. What's he referring to there? I mean, I get fundamental complementarity, but in the physical universe, I don't.
Maybe, and is that, I don't know. I mean, is that attributed to someone other than himself? I don't know.
I don't have any idea. And then the AC radio tube, auto gyro, clear fused quartz, air conditioning, practical automobile self starter. Oh, that's a practical automobile self starter. The Bendix there was a Bendix up above. I guess it wasn't very practical.
Well, I mean, is it the versus the crank? That
Yes.
was there, so that where you could actually break your arm
Yeah.
if you weren't necessarily careful. Yeah, that was that's a pretty big invention, actually. A pretty useful invention, I
It is
should
pretty
say.
useful. So he cites the Bendix starter earlier, I think. And then evidently it's the auto starter, Bendix. First self-starter was in 1912, and then the practical auto starter was in 1922, 10 years later.
Mhm.
Okay, I'm complete. Push button elevator. Wow. 1922. You could push a button and you didn't need a guy standing there. Insulin, vitamin D, and radar.
Hmm.
In this book over here, it says the refrigerator.
The
I can't-
refrigerator I had is 1919.
Oh, he had the refrigerator in 1919?
I did for something else that I looked up.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so I don't know.
And they have the blender in 1922. Technicolor was invented in 1922, and so was a snowmobile.
The
I don't know,
egg cooker.
an aga cooker. Well, I don't even know what that is.
As far as economics goes, we're actually getting into the roaring 20s too.
Yeah, we're getting into the roaring 20s.
Online, they had insulin, yes, like the list, but they also had the first 3D movie. Spectacles
Really?
with one red, one green lens. That was how far back 3D movies started.
Oh,
Wow.
water skiing was invented in 1922. How could Bucky leave that out? And you and
Since he was a water baby.
look at the size of those water skis. Jeez. Okay, any other comments or questions?
No.
Nitriding process in 23. And I don't have any idea what hafnium is. Does anybody know what hafnium is?
Nope.
No.
Well, it's probably about 50% of holmium.
Yeah.
Hafnium. Facts. So hafnium. HF. Okay, well, we get some idea that it's some kind of a weird crystal thingy. Okay, cool. Any other comments and questions?
No.
All right, first chromium plating by Mr. Fink. Mercury steam boiler by Emmett. It's interesting. I don't know what the significance of the Mercury steam boiler is, but it does down here that this aga cooker was developed some guy by some scientist who went blind, and he decided he'd help his wife cook, so he developed an aga cooker. Jeez. Oh my gosh. There's the ad for the aga cooker. When you meet another aga owner, it's like discovering an instant friend. That's marketing.
Sure.
That's marketing, folks. All right, good. Who wants to read 23?
Okay.
Good.
Okay. On nitriding process. We read that already, right? 1923.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think there's a bit more. The next page.
Oh, is there? Okay.
I think you read you started reading 1923.
Oh, did I?
Yeah. You want
I'm
to finish off 1923?
Okay, did we finish it? Mercury
No.
steam
The next page. There are a couple more.
Okay, there we go. Chemical physiology of muscle contraction. Okay, there we go. Bulldozer and Hubble discovers another galaxy.
And then I think in the book has got cotton buds, film, sound. It's got the bulldozer as well, and then auto gyro paves the way for vertical flight. And then power steering, wind tunnel came up. Xenon flash lamp, iconoscope, all in 1923. Online, they have got self-winding watch. And frozen food was in 1924 in the book, but Online it's Frozen Foods, Bird's Eye in 1923.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, to continue, the wind tunnel was developed in 23. Power steering was developed in 23. The autogyro, which was an airplane with a helicopter blade on top of it.
Hmm.
They appear superficially similar to helicopters, but with a single unpowered rotor. The early autogyros were less maneuverable than helicopters and were able to take off or descend, and were unable to take off or descend vertically. It predated the helicopter and so paved the way for vertical flight.
Hmm.
The bulldozer was invented in 1923. Sound film was invented in 23. And cotton buds that Ann talked about, they
Hmm.
are they're what you put in your ear, cotton, they're swabs. They were swabs. Leo Gertensang began to design a cotton swab after he saw his wife gluing cotton onto the ends of toothpicks to clean their baby's ears.
Hmm.
Wow. Okay. I wonder if the Flettner rotoship is the same as this gyrocopter, autogyro.
Let's read and see.
Yeah. Spectrohelioscope, atomic hydrogen welding, insulin fattening, liver of an anemia, liver for anemia, wave mechanics, by de Broglia, first dynamic loudspeakers on radio sets, first intercity bus lines, 1924. I'm sure my mom was born in 24. Airmail from New York to San Francisco was in 1924. Any other comments or?
No, I mean, it's interesting just to think about it in terms of loudspeakers, and what that, it's a way of actually communicating with people, believe it or not. Just things like that are actually, when you think about inventions, like more or less, I think about communication inventions as being so critical in how they actually can, essentially shape public perception. So if you think about things even like telephone, voice over IP, or any of these things. For me, I think communication devices are some of the most interesting inventions.
Wow.
Yeah, going back to Fuller, 1917 is when he got married. And in 1922, his daughter, Alexandra, at just around age 4. The information I had, she died of complications of polio and meningitis.
Yeah. That's pretty significant.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's also significant in that Fuller was still living a fairly wild life. And apparently he had been out with the boys over the weekend. And his daughter had said, "Will you bring me home a teddy bear or something like that?" And he forgot. And when he got home, she asked, and he, of course, had said he didn't have it. And she apparently died within a day or so of that. And he was just really guilt stricken.
Wow.
And yet, in some ways, well, maybe is to sort of soften some of his own self-blame.
Yeah.
That's when he started to think that it was the environment that was the cause of her poor health, and led to his eventual notion of reform the environment, not the individual.
Very cool. And then you mentioned this, but continuing with this, Abraham Flexner's saying, you know, is social work a profession in 1915? Going with the 1917, Mary Richmond's responds, and then again in 1922, she publishes What is Social Casework, an introductory. So those are significant years.
Yeah, and what happened in 1921, I think it was, the American Red Cross had decided that they would hire this young profession of social work in Red Cross work. But because the Jane Addams at the time was a pacifist, she stood against the war. And as a result, the Red Cross fired everybody because they said they couldn't be associated with somebody who took a position like that.
Wow.
And then and Adams then got the Nobel Peace Prize in the 30s.
Who got the Nobel Peace Prize?
This Jane Addams. Yeah.
Oh, wow. But she had to get fired from the Red Cross in order to, as a prerequisite.
Well, it wasn't that she was fired, it's that the Red Cross had decided to hire a social worker, so it legitimized the profession, finally. And then after Adams was public as a pacifist, and she was supporting Teddy Roosevelt as far as his presidential run. And that's when the Red Cross took a policy decision, says, we can't have this kind of
activism,
political alignment. So they got rid of all the social work employees that they had just hired.
Wow. Totally weird. Human beings are the most interesting people.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for the context too on Bucky's personal life here. That's wonderful. Okay. I think I read 1924. He wants to read 25.
I can do it.
Okay.
Although Barry Lilliam, I don't know, Beryllium.
Beryllium.
Beryllium. Yeah, thanks. I mean, you know, some of these copper electrochemical restoration of corrosion, Fink. Transmutation of mercury to gold. Discovery of rhenium. Am I saying, I don't know if that's correct.
Yeah, I don't know what it is either.
First commercial airline on regular schedule. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Phototelegraphy. Methanol.
Yeah.
Science and the modern world. Whitehead. Okay. Well, that's an interesting. Go ahead.
Yeah. There's a couple things in this book that Anne referred us to. Fast frozen food happened in 1924. Paper tissues happened in 1924. The ultracentrifuge was in 1924. They had centrifuges, but this was sped up. And that's it for 24 in this book. Cool. In 25 in this book is the 35 millimeter camera.
Interesting.
Yeah. A fluidized bed reactor. Patented a chemical reactor in which the large particles could be fluidized by forcing an upward current of gas through the solid. Catalytic cracking, fluidized bed reactor. You use the reactor to extract gas from lignite, which was then piped directly to engines for compressing ammonia. Okay. We're approaching the end of our evening. Let's see what we got here. We can finish through, we'll go down to we'll end 1927 and we'll go from there. Okay. If that's okay with everybody. All right.
Yeah.
Who wants to read 20?
19.
Go ahead.
Which one? 20. Let me open up.
Just
You're
right
at
over.
26. Yeah, movies talking electric refrigerator. Dirigible to North Pole, airplane to the North Pole, liquid fuel rocket, Goddard.
Wow,
Condition.
that was a while ago in this book, right?
Yeah, and conditional reflexes, Pavlov.
What's interesting on that one, looking at movies talking, I just realized where my mother grew up in the province of Alberta, about 500 miles from here, they had a huge buffalo park. And it was the home of Hollywood movies, cowboy and Indian movies, because they could be out in the big prairie chasing actual buffalo herds.
Wow.
And so some of the early Hollywood movie stars, like Hoot Gibson, who was a cowboy, I guess, they were often on site in my mother's hometown. And my grandfather, the sheet metal, he bought a touring car, and he would take visitors out into the park to see the buffalo and to see the movie sets and the shooting.
It's funny, this book gives Goddard credit for developing a liquid fuel rocket in 1914. And then we have the liquid fuel rocket in 1926, according to Bucky. That's 12 years later. And maybe this reference in 1914 in this book is just talking about actually having it work, having a liquid fuel rocket work, but then having the actual rocket was 1926 when they developed the first maybe reliable rocket. I don't know. But that's
Sounds about right.
okay, cool. Any other comments or questions? We'll go ahead and finish 27. There's quite a few listed here. Pavlov's conditional reflexes in 26. That's kind of interesting. And the aerosol spray was in 26. Let's see if he gives us credit, but this book gives the Enigma machine, 1926.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's interesting.
The German army adopted this supposedly impenetrable coding machine. Eventually, this device that eventually proved to be their undoing thanks to Turing. But the Enigma machine was invented in 26.
Supposedly, I think I was at the University of Penn and they have a copy of it. They said it used properly, it could be uncrackable.
Yeah. I think that,
But obviously the Turing picked up on a pattern.
but the only reason why I got it was because this one person always ended their communication with a certain,
Yes.
and it was, if it hadn't been for that, they would have never got it.
And the interesting thing after that is the statistical use of the intelligence that they were able to gather from that, so that the Germans couldn't pick up on their ability to, that they were able to break the code.
Oh, wow.
So that it was almost, you have a almost game theory kind of approach, is that.
Huh. Because I never knew they figured out a solution to that. I know that when they first broke the code, and according to the movie, when they first broke the code, they had to let a transport with a bunch of soldiers on it get submarined by the, get submarined.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, they had to let that happen because if they would have prevented that, then the Germans would have known that they broke the code, but they were working on some other big event and didn't want the Germans to know, so they let that ship sink. That's something, huh?
Wouldn't want that on my conscience.
Yeah, no kidding. Well, war is a terrible thing. Okay,
Well, not saving somebody is even harder.
yeah, yeah. Who wants to read?
I'll read the last one. A German lightweight streamlined rail car beginning. You just went over. I can't say
Right.
it.
Sorry.
Beginning of streamlining. Television, laboratory only. Photoelectric cell. Limburg flies airplane nonstop across the Atlantic from New York to Paris. Heisenberg determinacy. Dirac predicts existence of antiparticles. Holland Tunnel from New York to New Jersey. I can appreciate that. The Maximum House, Buckminster Fuller. Synergetic geometry, B. Fuller, Buckminster Fuller. Michelson's final most accurate measurement of speed of light in vacuo credited by World Science in 1970. Transatlantic telephone service inaugurated.
Yeah, and that's it for that year. The fluorescent lamp was in 1926, says this book. And this is the first television.
Wow.
That's weird.
That's the first television.
Yeah.
Wow.
In the laboratory only. This book attributes it to 1926. PVC was invented in 1926. The iron lung was invented in 1927. Boy, Anne, I'm so glad you found me this book. Thank you very much.
Most welcome.
The chainsaw in 1927. Anodized aluminum was 1927. Very interesting. Transatlantic telephone service. Wowie zowie. Okay, well, I'm going to keep this book up here instead of putting it back there in that other shelf. So I'll have it ready for. And let's take a look and see what I maybe missed on the work that Richard had done here. 1925.
Okay, to add a little bit to finish off the list online, there is the first quartz crystal watch.
Oh, wow.
And the other one is also the quartz clock as well. I think that's significant.
It is.
Cool. So from 25 to 29, the Milford conferences are converged over a 5-year period with conclusion that social casework is generic to the profession of social work. The first of several periodic meetings on the 20th, in the 20th and turn of the 21st century as a professional status of social work. Well, I'm glad we got it legitimized to some degree.
Yeah.
Cool. And so then we're going to start on 1928. So we can go ahead and cite this 1927. February, forced out, resigned from managerial position in Stockade, Midwest alcohol problems, daughter. This is about Bucky.
Yeah. That's when his second daughter, Allegra, was born. And in February, and then it was November that he had that Lake Michigan experience. And supposedly the beginning then of Guinea Pig B.
Isn't it kind of like significant that we would end on 1927 and that's the time when Bucky considered suicide? And that's our ending. That's our thought. That's our takeaway thought for tonight. Except we'll go down to the next page and talk about his guinea pig bee experiment. Do you want to explain that, Richard?
Well, that's when he said that instead of trying to live up to what everybody thought he should be, he decided that he was going to try living on only experiential evidence and his own judgment about what was important, and stop trying to live up to somebody else's expectations. And so that's, I guess, when he had that vision of wanting the world to work for 100% of humanity without disadvantage to anyone or any of the environment.
Wow. What a great place to call it quits for tonight.
Yeah.
Wonderful. So, Richard, let's you go last, Richard, because so I'll go first tonight. So this is just continuing on. I think if people understood history better, there'd be less chaos in the world today. If people understood how they got where they are, because things seem so instantaneous and so natural and so, I mean, you don't have to walk over to television and turn a dial, this analog stuff is going out the window. Everything is digital, instantly available. And this is just such a good reminder for me. And I'm grateful for all your contributions. I love the book, Ann. And Richard, I think just to look at the chronofiles of Bucky and not include the events in his life that you put in your sheet would have been really, I don't want to say tragic, but it's so cool to know that in 1927, when the German lightweight steamliner rail car started up and the photoelectric cell started and television was born in the laboratory, that was the year that he decided that he was only going to focus on things that worked for 100% of humanity and did not leave anyone behind. That to me is mind-boggling. What fun it's been to be tonight. Let's have Richard go last. Joe, how are you feeling and what are your takeaways?
I'm feeling actually, pretty good. I mean, I think this is an interesting exercise, just going through this. I'm trying to pick up a little bit on a pattern to see what Bucky was seeing. And for me that, it seems like obviously he had a lot of different interests. Because I'm thinking about what I would have included. And I would have maybe included a little bit more of like some of the economic events that had occurred during that period. And as well as maybe a couple of different inventions, maybe because they obviously based on my experiences related to automobiles. So, my grandfather was in that industry. And so, but you can also see is one pattern is that you're seeing certain advancements in science that he's capturing, as well as the industrial aspects of the turn of the century. It's interesting just to see how his mind works, and what he would have what he did capture, and that were relevant to him, as well as to the world. And so I think it gives us an insight as to who Bucky really was. I mean, everything else that he's writing about, it's not as if it's his personal diary that he's writing about, his ideas mostly, but this is almost like a personal insight as to the way he's kind of seeing the world evolve around him. So from that perspective, I think it's a good exercise. I also think that, just having some context, I'm looking back at some of these things and having to look some of them up for the first time, to be quite honest. And as we go through them, it's good to be able to go through and learn some new learn about new inventions, and learn some new things about how things evolved at the turn of the century. So, it's a good exercise. I really do. I think it kind of stretches us from our usual approach. And so from that, it's good to get outside of what we normally do. So, Anne, how do you feel, and what do you take away from today?
A lot. I got a lot, which I'm thrilled about. The one that came up, there are three things that came up for me. One is earlier, I think, Richard, you and Steve were talking about, what your grandparents were doing, right? Working on back, or was it I think your grandparents, right? So, and then it got me thinking, because in Asia, back in those days, most people were not educated. So, and then I thought about it, because I only knew one grandparent. The other three passed away even way before World War II. So when my parents were really young, my mom was 8 and 10 years old when both parents passed away. My father's side, my grandfather passed away when my dad was about 10 or 12 years old. So then, and it never occurred to me to ask what they were doing back then. So that's a question I'm going to be asking. I don't have grandparents around. My mom is still around. My dad is no longer around. Yeah. So I'm going to check with my mom, but I don't know how to get, from my dad's side, because I think, let me see, only one sister is left and she's got dementia. So I'm not sure how we're going to get info, but let me try. Okay. Then the other one was looking backwards. I realized I could trace back the impact. We're taking over the convent school that we used to study in on Penang Island, right? We're taking on to turn it into an international school. The only way right now for the sisters to save the buildings, because right now the government is using that as public schools, but they have 57 locations all over Malaysia, prime property. And so they just want to make sure that it doesn't, it gets saved for the sisters, right? Yeah, the missionary sisters. So then I know the history, where the school started in 1852, which is almost 200 years ago. But the other day, my sister said something I didn't think about that. In the first the British representative that came to Malaysia, and one of the places established was on Penang Island in 1786. And I find out, because right smack in the middle of the convent is this building. They call it the government house, right? And that was the house that this Sir Francis Light lived in, and they dug the first well on the island, and it's still there. And it's right smack in the middle. I thought that that was built together with the convent, but no, that building was there, and the convent was built around it. You know, so we're gonna be taking charge of that property and taking care of it soon. Okay, so that was and then if you look backwards, when the British arrived, we have a lot of British influence in our country. That's why English, for many of us, our English is strong. Because my principal was an Irish nun, you know, back in the days in the habit and everything. But the point is in Southeast Asia, there are about 3 countries that are English speaking. The Philippines, because of the American, they colonized the Philippines, and Malaysia and Singapore because the British colonized our country. So otherwise we would be like Thailand and Indonesia and Vietnam and Cambodia, and where it was harder for them to, no, not necessarily. It's harder for them to grow across the world because many of their people still don't really speak English well, you know. So that kind of history. So, you know, when I look back as we were talking, it was, yeah, that's where we are at today, that allowed us to be so familiar with the Western style of education, which I brought into to sort of hybrid it with Asia, right? The Asian style. Because if I do purely the Western style, we're going to lose a lot of our Asianness, yeah? So, and the parents in Asia, they cannot handle if it's just purely Western. They cannot. And acceptance by the government definitely will not be there, you know? So that nice marry there. And the last bit here is, Steve, you said that if people knew history, right, then it won't be so bad. Going through this whole process with all of you here is 2 things: history and cosmic integrity, that the world is eternally regenerative, and the fact that cosmic accounting has no bankruptcy. Unfortunately, all the problems we're also facing is due to financial people who are, and the economists who do not know this. They completely do not know this. In so many countries, and they're advising, you know, the country what to do, and that scarcity thing. And anyway, you get where I'm going with it. Yeah. So that's why I got out today. Very, very powerful stuff. And Richard, how do you feel, and what is your takeaway?
That's an awesome takeaway.
Well, just as you were talking about the convent and the sisters, there's another commonality. When I moved back from Ontario to Alberta, I took a job with Catholic sisters who were running a youth center for teenage girls. And there were 60 girls in a group home kind of campus. And these sisters had come from Pennsylvania in 1911. And to help with youth problems, delinquency, and young women getting into prostitution and that sort of work. But the convent people were invited to come to Alberta. And when you come to set up a new house, a new convent, it must be set up by novitiates. And then they get ordained into their new house. Well, the novitiates that were sent from Pennsylvania out to Alberta, which is in the American geography, that's sent out to Montana and then had to come north to Alberta. They were 4 of them. They were 17 years old, young women that came all the way out here with nothing but a letter of welcome, and no money, no funds, just, we're glad you're here, and please go and help all these young people.
Wow.
And when I worked with him in the 70s, one of the original 4 was still there. And so she had fascinating stories to tell about those years. But on the chronophile, just tonight thinking about if Fuller was keeping these notes in a daily diary context, I'm really amazed that he could do that with all the personal life issues that he was going through right up till 1927. And when I think of myself trying to do a chronophile, because I certainly didn't keep a daily journal, I had to reflect back and think about what was going on at certain times in my life. And so I'm wondering whether Fuller might have done something like that as he was writing Critical Path. So it's an interesting question in terms of how he was to gather all of this information and hold it enough that he could write about it. Because I mean, we've now seen some of the things that he missed, but I think I'm overwhelmed anyway with everything that he was able to contain and then put down in writing, and not really have a lot of inaccuracies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, if I think about myself, I would be hopeless trying to match the kind of chronophiling he did.
Yeah.
And anyway, that's my big takeaway is how did he do it and when did he do it?
Very good.
Yeah.
Well, thank you all very much. And let's see, what is next week? Okay, I'll be here next week. Week after that, I won't be here.
Okay.
I will not be here next week.
You won't be here next week,
I will
Joe?
not be here next week. No.
Okay, well, if it's 3 of us, we'll probably proceed. If it's 2 of us, we probably won't.
Right.
So we'll see how it goes.
I'll
And
be here.
what's that, Ann?
I'll be here next week.
Okay, good. All righty.
Thanks, Sam.
Thank you all.
Okay.
See ya.
Take care, guys.
Bye.
Bye-bye.